Welcome to the final program of the Joaquin Miller Poetry Series. I am Karen Alanier, founder of the series. I'll start with a few words about what to expect for this program. My co-host Majda Gama will be placing information, including bios, in the chat. You might wish to save the chat, which you can do at the lower right-hand side of the chat window. Just click the three dots and then click the option in the drop-down menu to save the chat. Best to save the chat before you exit the Zoom session. You can do this multiple times. This evening's program culminates 45 years of summer readings that used to take place in the poet Joaquin Miller's cabin or his backyard of that cabin. It was a challenging location to stage our readings, but ultimately a sacred environment for poetry. Our board member, Dr. James Howard Bell, Jim, asked for use of the cabin. In 1976, they gave us the key and we held writing workshops for a couple of years before I started the reading series. All the National Park Service wanted to know from us was that our samples of poetry didn't include profanities, and maybe that we weren't biting the ankles of society ladies like Joaquin Miller did in his mission to gain recognition for poetry. Many poets have helped produce these years of programs. For this program, thanks goes to Rosemary Winslow, Henry Crawford, Julian Berman, Renee Garrity, Majda Gama, and Sister Joy. As has been our tradition, Miles David Moore will read Miller's poem, Columbus. Miles, take the stage.
Welcome, everyone. It's been my honor to read Joaquin Miller's Victorian fustian masterpiece, Columbus, for the last several years. I'm sort of sorry to have it be the last time, but it is an honor to do it again. Behind him lay the gray Azores, behind the gates of Hercules. Before him, not the ghost of shores, before him only shoreless seas. The good mate said, "Now we must pray, for lo, the very stars are gone. Brave admiral, speak, what shall I say? Why say, sail on, and on. My men grow mutinous day by day, my men grow ghastly wan and weak." The stout mate thought of home. A spray of salt wave washed his swarthy cheek. "What shall I say, brave admiral, say, if we sight naught but seas at dawn? Why, you shall say at break of day, sail on, and on." They sailed and sailed as winds might blow, until at last the blanched mate said, "Why, now not even God would know, should I and all my men fall dead. These very winds forget their way, for God from these dead seas is gone. Now speak, brave admiral, speak and say." He said, sail on, and on. They sailed, then spake the mate. "The mad sea shows his teeth tonight. He curls his lip, he lies in wait with lifted teeth, as if to bite. Brave admiral, say but one good word. What shall we do when hope is gone?" The words leapt like a leaping sword. Sail on, and on. They then, pale and worn, he kept his deck and peered through darkness. Ah, that night of all dark nights. And then a speck, a light, at last, a light! It grew, a starlit flag unfurled. It grew to be time's burst of dawn. He gained a world, he gave that world its grandest lesson. On, sail on.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you so much. Jacklyn Potter ran Miller Cabin series for 22 of the 45 years from 1984 until her passing in 2006. Her organizational skills and her sensitive introductions were extraordinarily memorable. Her dear friends and colleagues, Ann Becker and Michael Davis, will now give an interactive reading of poems by Jacklyn Potter. Anne, the stage is yours to share with Michael.
Thank you. This is a wonderful honor to be able to read Jackie's poems. I knew Jackie originally in the 1970s until her death. And so I'm the only person, since I knew her when we were so young, that has a dispensation to call her Jackie instead of Jacklyn. And so the poem I'm going to begin with, which is one that she read quite often, and it has there are two themes in it. One has to do with the garden, and the other has to do with family, which were Jackie's themes that she went to again and again. The groaning bed. She calls to you in voices from the garden, mysterious heartaches of the eggplant. Awaiting your return, she is dazzled by its opaque, gleaming skin. She wants to tell you that something is always dying in this damnable place. The cucumber leaves flutter and hang from their trellis, white with disease. In the autumn light, the moss roses turn their timeless clocks toward an unknown withered hour. And in the garden beds, congregated marigolds force carrot tops to the ground. The marigold wall, a low cathedral of mockery, where one green imitates another. The nightshade burlesques the melon flower. How cluttered the garden grows with its offerings of tomatoes that bend and break their lengthening vines. The weeds crowd in. They mob the former silence of her rose, her magic risen from carefully covered seeds. And now she tells you it's for you to do the pulling and holding and binding. Each day, the green fruit turns deep and heavy. It gives you harvest and breaks down its home. On any bed of your house, you are never alone with that woman who came before her, comes before you. As you draw near, knowing your desire, the seeds, all the fathers, all the mothers, the children within wrestle and shout to life on your groaning bed.
So I'm going to read a poem. We'll make this interactive. I did have a few words too, and I just wanted to say about the Miller Cabin series and Jacklyn Potter that I got to know Jacklyn as she hosted the Joaquin Miller Cabin reading series out in the woods of Rock Creek Park. Jacklyn made the series what it was. She was welcoming and open, very generous to both the readers and those who came to listen. And then she opened her house to us all. Many nights over many summers, I remember socializing and playing music on her porch as the fireflies flickered. The programs were stunning, as was nature, which would often intervene. Birds rising from the creek at dusk behind the reading poet. But the plein air poetry performance, the whole show, was Jacklyn, and it was fabulous. I will and do miss it and her very deeply. Jacklyn was a performer. This is one of her poems with a good bit of that in it. Star, you said sing, Daddy, and I sang with melodies lilting through my baby shoelaces, down into my eyes, fell the starlight of yours, and my proud heart filled your repertoire. Let's hear some songs, you said, for Red Cross war veterans and heroes and the Chamber of Commerce. My braids glistened and my hands tossed kisses to hundreds of hands, clattering praise. You said, sing, Daddy, and school days ended early with a microphone in my hand. My smile and the bow in my hair were on the air. Perfect and best, I sang and heard your banjo ring. You said, sing. Read through these watermarks. Your starlight falls from my eyes. Can you hear this scratching on the page? Daddy, I am singing. Anne?
Yes. And another of Jackie's sort of poems that she really liked to read, that certainly you can hear her performer part of her speak. And at a certain point, she moved to Chincoteague Island, where she worked for the agricultural extension of Virginia. And she actually was fired from that job and was able to bring a case saying that she was fired for being a woman, at which she won. And she used to tell wonderful stories about that. So this poem takes place on Chincoteague. A woman's choice. The black coat. It's the key to fashion. She wants it. The one with the collar that won't quit. The mid-calf, pure wool black coat. The limit. The essence. Half price. The black coat. She wants it. She tries it. The perfect coat. She is particular, precise. She is the woman in the black coat. See her lie in iridescent foam. Soft wool rides the waves. But now she gives it back to the rack. As she watches the boats that go for clams and scallops, the wind slaps her, the wind that wears kid gloves. She has consumed many heads of lettuce. She has picked at many bones of fish. Each day, she repeats 1,000 motions. She gathers her heart and body at last home at peace with her solitary choosing. The seagulls wing before her window screen. She wears her skin alone to bed.
So long after Elsa Lasker Schuler. You never come with the morning. It's your time of day. I sit with my pillow of stars. Among the tea roses, there is no more tea in their luscious cups. I color your sky with my red pen's heart, remembering your words. There is a knocking at my door. It is my own heart among the fronds. The terrible glow of roses burns out in the sky's gray. You never come with the morning. I do not hear your footstep. Oh, those golden earrings.
And at one time, Jackie was diagnosed with a brain tumor, which was benign, but not benign. And so she ended up going to a neurosurgeon who was able to take the tumor out. And they developed a really good relationship. And but it really did affect her optic nerve. So she couldn't see very well afterwards. To the neurosurgeon for A.K. Omaya. What I don't like about poems is the voice, full of feathers and light. pretending to know what it does not know. My voice comes now to your hand. You tell me you know more about me than I think. Soon you'll touch what I can't see. Silent, it grows and hangs beneath the lobes at the inner crossroads of my eyes. Have you seen a blur of birds thrilled by their progress to the wire? With startled landings, they seek a balanced air. They bend and flap and turn their heads until they can hold still enough to see, still enough to fly.
And this is a poem of Jacklyn's. It's got a good bit of her history in it, which reminds me of some of mine. She might have spent some time in her youth with her father and with her family on military base. And this one is entitled Hostage. I remember my mother's hair rolled in rags as she slipped from room to room, her right arm crooked before her. Sometimes she carried a rattling glass of iced tea and a feather duster. Her face had already found the habit of searching corners warily for what she'd lost. My home was World War II temporary quarters. The first roads I traveled were grit, dull, tight, and steamy, not like the colored veins of the road map beside me now in the passenger seat. I will not be like her. But I sleep in wadded, sweaty sheets. My dog near me, I let him fill the bed with burrs and dog hair. In the morning, the road fills with honeysuckle mist curling through loblolly pines. From my mother, a dream for herself was forbidden. She did not find this out. She ironed dresses for my song and dance routine as soldiers practiced maneuvers out back in the Belvoir woods. She tied bows around my French braids and taught me to say sophisticated while the troops marched by, singing and shouting, "Sound off."
Wow, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Anne. You really bring Jacklyn into our vision, into our hearts. It's so moving to have her here with us in this way. So thank you very much. The Jacklyn Potter Young Poets Competition is a program that I launched in 1988 with the help of Gail Renadivi. It wasn't called Jacklyn Potter at that time, obviously. Jacklyn got to hear the fruits of those wonderful young poets. And I know that we have some young poets in our audience tonight, so welcome to them. And so happy that they could be here with us. Anyway, Gail Renadivi was an American University MFA student. And the first 14 years are documented in Cabin Fever, which Jacklyn Potter edited with two others. And you will get to hear more about that later in the program and from the other co-editors. Right now, I am turning over the stage to Julian Berman, a former winner of the Jacklyn Potter Young Poets Competition and the Young Poets director since 2019. So take it away, Julian.
Thank you so much, Karen, and hello, everybody. I'm really glad to be invited here to participate in this program honoring Jacklyn Potter. Back in 2019, I remember reading at an event very similar to this. And it was actually my first experience, like reading my poetry at like a really public event. And it felt great just to finally find a community of writers in my area. One of my favorite things about running and directing this competition is that I get to hear young writers read alongside published poets, which makes the future look kind of more inspiring, then we're in tough times right now, and so hearing young poets read, I don't know, warms me a little bit. Jenna's poetry, Jenna Neski, is the current winner, and her poetry is incredibly touching. And so I'm really glad to hear her today, continuing the tradition. Take it away, Jenna.
Thank you. The first poem I'm going to be reading is Echolalia. As they sow themselves like feathers in the slits of my gums, I speak like a sleepwalker. How else can I say that I am autistic, that songbirds pass like tongues between my teeth, that I am a dreamer, rinsing my mouth with blood and my feet with pomegranate seeds? The sunbeams are red on the backs of the sparrows, smooth and liquid as milk. I drink the marrow, crush the stalks of the dawn, and split the bones of the birds and lift them to my face, inking them into my throat. Only flesh can bloom in a daybed so starless. Light trembles against me like an infant, like the sun can stand on one knee, to grieve, to birth. Was it I who was strange all along? I, autist, who listens with both ears and crouches on both feet and adores the birds with both arms, the foreign chirp of echolalia, how ecstasy folds around me like eyes waiting for sleep. I, whose first lover was the calls of the flock. I, who drowned in my first kiss. I learned love the same night as I learned violence, reaping the plumes off my wings the way they planted new syllables in me, knuckles spilling with my hair and heels in my ribcage. I kept my eyes open when they hooked their palms to my cheeks and lifted my face to theirs and gorged themselves with me. I kept my eyes open, silent and full of waiting. And the second poem is called Eye Contact. Here is a canopy like a calcium horde of angels, like vision, the drum of stretched fat, and we know how to chew, how to eat from the ducts. How bold is it to open oneself like lips? How sugary is the seal of thought, the suction of thinking aloud, of speaking with the eyes, rather than creasing the mouth like butcher's paper. And we know how to thread our eyelids with teeth to entreat faces like another piece of nostalgia. Moshe, too, could not look in God's eyes after turning water into blood. Why is it that, though we are red as heifers, our eyes are translucent? And we stand like the dead, and we bow like a cloudburst, and we stand like trees, wet with light and blackened by worship. Who but the trees can possess? Who but the roots drink soil? In the morning, we avert our eyes like branches, and we learn how to love before consumption. In the morning, the God who guards us as the pupil of his eye is the same God who loves like an autistic girl, eyes downturned and swelling with the underwoods. And the third poem is called Don't Forget. In the morning, I am a full-bellied sea washing myself with concrete as you lie draped across the sidewalk, centipede grass growing like a cityscape between your fingers. I cannot help but shiver. Like sequins, we are inside a more voracious movement. We must write our own elegies. You hold my hand as an eye holds sleep, and together we burn into silver, folding into the curb as though it were its own ecosystem, heels spangled with gravel. You shout, look, and I say what? The squirrel is pounding its shriveled body on a teal bird feeder. You shout, hey, this way. You are talking to the squirrel. It doesn't turn, but it drives its head inside the feeder and spasms like a face. It was 5 weeks ago when I wanted more than anything to collect myself into the pores of the earth like an acorn, suck my cheeks with silt as though I wasn't the last to know the eyes of the sun. It was 4 years ago when my parents confirmed I was autistic, and 3 years later until they told me. It was 2 days ago when I pressed my lips to your ear and introduced myself for the first time. The silence then is the same as the silence now. The clouds bending around the ozone, the sky abuzz, the moths drinking the trees. Every day the world is ending.
Thank you so much, Jenna. That was lovely. So now I'm going to read a poem. My poem is called The Snake and the Sea, and it's inspired by, so every year over the summer, my family travels up to the marshes in Cape Cod, to the beach. And this is inspired by the island that we stay on for a couple weeks every year. Dozens of bumper stickers creep down Lieutenant in early June when the sun rises at 6, crossing a single bridge and shattering the pewter of a waning afternoon. Here, each mote of sand exists, visible, dusting white the tips of marsh grass, tragic ornamentation, trying to remind, trying to recall of the paler white, the different white, sometime before, ago, the paler snowy tips of December's lubrication. Here now, the procession of automotion is visible, clearly visible, grinding the white ichor into the asphalt and tar. Behind the snake, the running man pivots and coughs and stares up at the hill as the invasive amphibian grows and thickens, enlarging the darkness, gathering the darkness. FM speakers spew insidious tones, retching synthesized tunes into the saturated vista. Souped up dune buggies cruise in the frenzy of beach festivity. What festivity? Paradisal white slips into limpid tide pools. What ambrosia? Atlantic balm, watery radiance. And there, in sinister flatness, weaves the snake. Dune buggies and sham umbrellas gathering in the darkness. The running man follows the drift of the heavy machines over the bridge to the shore. To what do we owe this solemn extinction? The white of earth, of sand, of grass is a theater. The osprey are the cast, the waves, the set. Wild dunes vanishing, and the pickups and the beach boys watch from the balcony, peering in above the clouds, drifting through half-thought forms. The conch blows, the running man stops. The wind through the white-green summer grass turns crisp as the sea washes over the bridge and joins as one with the heavens. Thank you very much. And I know that there are some young poets in the audience, one of whom I think I actually read with in 2019. So thank you so much for coming and sort of continuing the tradition. I'd now like to welcome Kathy Haley to read a few of her poems. Kathy is a teacher of English and creative writing in Northern Virginia, and interestingly enough, was present a few years ago when I read at this event in the Miller Cabin in Rock Creek Park. So thank you so much, Kathy.
Thanks, Julian. Many of my students entered the Jacklyn Potter contest over the years, and one of the things I loved about it was that it asked for 5 poems instead of just 1. It was unique in that way. And I was lucky to have several Woodbridge High School winners, including Renato Icona. He's the one that read with Julian. My son, Neil Haley, Taylor Petty, Kat Brown, and Katie Casey, some of whom are here tonight. Send a wave up if you'd like. And thanks for coming. And thank you for the opportunity to read my poetry. I'll start with a poem from my forthcoming chapbook, Romance Remembered. Tea kettle whistles, inviting afternoon tea. Mom reminisces. Youth in New Jersey, single life in Manhattan. Greek circle dancing, wedding in satin. Jitterbug swing, enhancing island honeymoon. Romance for hours. Alexa playing her tunes, crooning their amours. She reminds me to write all before she cannot recall. The next poem came out of my grieving process. We lost our daughter, Alexandra, in a car accident on Halloween 2018. The title is A Visit. Orange cardinal, unmasked anomaly, radiates iridescent tangerine feathers in a variegated fan mottled with cream, splotchy as a Jackson Pollock, a fanciful dreamsicle reminiscent of childhood laughter. Patient and polite, or coy, our newcomer waits her turn at the feeder, a chance to snatch a sunflower seed, then dances with flourish, tail feathers tick-tock, keeping time, brightening gray skies as a creamsicle summer wanes. She crosses from apple tree to rhododendron, to the thick of forest oaks, a slalom course of undulating flight. Only inches from tree line, she redirects, swoops up, alighting on an iron perch or wooden rocker rail, observing a quiet moment as if she belongs. You're extraordinary, I tell her, ethereal being, elegant, graceful, rare and elusive, my obsession. This cream of a bird, celestial gift, or conjuring of poetic imagination. A bird within a dream, summoned by grief, invites us out of darkness to fall in love with orange in the month before we face the forever sadness of jack-o'-lanterns, pushing us to smile even in mourning. I hear her song, recognizing the rhythm of a revered name, 4 syllables, accent on the third, the parlay of veiled poetry, a cherished gift. Expectation grows, a desire to connect. She brings ephemeral joy, even as brown leaves fall, dotting a still green lawn, the consequence of drought, until she's lost again in the density of poplar leaves. A thin veil separates us, thinnest in the outdoors. I welcome this fleeting exchange, corporeal, secure in spirit, that is true, alive. I seek solace in the holes in the sky and wonder, will she visit again? Will we know her if her mask is more defined? Or will she move beyond? How many souls exist within her? And my third poem is a connecting of the experiences of my Greek ancestors with the war in Ukraine. Echoes, 1922 to 2022, and it's a villanelle. Attacked by people once loved, now abhorred, families flee, homelands in disarray. I hear echoes in the language of war. My people expelled from Asia Minor, vying for space in small boats to escape, attacked by people once loved, then abhorred. Refugees fled toward the Aegean shore, fires ablaze, spreading along Smyrna's quay. I hear echoes in the language of war. Putin, heralding historical lore, unleashes wrath and terror in Ukraine, attacked by people once loved, now abhorred. A tide of crimes, rape, genocide, torture, civilian strikes on churches, schools, railways. I hear echoes in the language of war. Peaceful coexistence, friendly rapport, shattered, though bloodlines remain intertwined. Attacked by people once loved, then abhorred. I hear echoes in the language of war. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Kathy. My heart goes out to you. I was unaware of your family's loss.
Thank you.
And what a beautifully rendered villanelle to conclude your portion of the program. Tour de force, Kathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And thank you to Julian for hosting the Young Poets, for your own poem, and for introducing Kathy. I'm going to miss you, but I'm so glad that you'll be going off to Harvard, and you'll keep in touch, I'm sure. So next we have Arden Levine, and WordWorks is proud to present her because She was a student of Jacklyn Potter's when Jacklyn taught elementary school in the greater Washington, D.C. area. We have the pleasure of presenting her here at the Miller Poetry Series. I know that Jacklyn is with you tonight, Arden, so take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen. I not only have a Jacklyn story, I have a Jacklyn artifact that I'm going to share with my third poem, but I'm going to start with a couple of short poems from my collection, Ladies Abecetery. This is a collection of microbiographies of women in verse. Each one is titled as a letter, and the book is dedicated to Jacklyn because she had a hand in teaching me the alphabet. N receives gifts from them, broken, just for her. Here is a bright patch of red on a blue quilt. Here are thick, smooth splinters and glittering shale chipped from the leveled mountain. Here, they brought her the last zinnia and some water to hold it for a day or two. After that, she will hang it by its heels so blood rushes to its head. The water is no good for drinking or washing or making tea. Here is a whistle that sounds at an inaudible frequency and a piano with its strings cut. They bring her here, low. And yet, here, her raised, accepting arms, her empty, upturned palms. F opens a beer on the first Sunday after Thanksgiving and tells everyone about this year's pies, about how most of the customers wanted cherry and not the usual pumpkin or apple, and how orders flew in like insects through open windows. Then she says that late Wednesday night, she dropped a tray of 8, watched them shatter their faces against the kitchen tiles, spill their ruby innards. What did you do then? Everyone asks. Roll dough. She places that reply so casually down, it's as if she had described knocking over a cup of water in her sleep and waking to find the floor already near dry. This, and not a story of toil in making, toil in cleaning, toil in remaking, mourning loss. Anyway, she claims to have liked the second batch better. Smooth, clean edges, full. Okay, so there I was in my kindergarten classroom, and Jacklyn comes and sits down next to me while I was doing whatever I was doing, and she says, "Why don't you tell me a poem?" And so I do that, and she transcribes it for me, and there it is. And this is where poetry starts for me. Jacklyn's handwriting in Sharpie on a piece of elementary school construction paper. And if you can't read it, it's okay, because I will give you the highlights of it. It was night. The love went by. The side of the dark got lighter and lighter until it was morning. And maybe that's the poem I really needed tonight. But I actually wrote a poem about that process of writing that poem. And it's a persona poem of Jacklyn. And I was also, incidentally, the flower girl at her wedding. So Marchant, Lucky, this one's for you. Miss Jacklyn analyzes love. I asked her for a poem. She made one that went, it was night, the love went by. My young author knew love was a good word. At times, love spent time in her house. I told her that's lovely. So the poem was lovely and the word was lovely. Love also, maybe, was lovely. But long still would she wait for an understanding of adverbs, leewards that live leeward, that protect love and other words from wind damage, from collapsing if they otherwise held up a sentence alone. What does love do when it goes by? My young author had no knowledge of Paul Revere when she wrote the poem. But for my part, I picture love galloping through a town square late at night. Not galloping, I'm forcing the metaphor. Love is walking, assertively walking. It is announcing, loudly announcing. Get up, love is going by. If you're asleep, wake up. If you're writing, come have a look at love here in the flesh. If you're making love, keep doing that. Lovely.
Oh my goodness. What an evening for poetry and for paying tribute to Jacklyn Potter. Arden, that was an amazing presentation. And you have a lovely book, and we recommend that to our audience. Now, I would like to introduce to you our next reader, who is our latest new author, Tara Betts. And her book is here in my house. I'm not sure that it's in her house yet, Refused to Disappear. It's hot off the press. And I was pleased to hear that Tara, who lives in Chicago, but who has read live in Washington, D.C., where this program broadcasts from, always wanted to read in the Joaquin Miller poetry series. Jacklyn would have been proud to present Tara and these poems, which pay particular attention to women, especially Black women. Take it away, Tara.
Can I just see, she took my opening line. Thank you, Ken. And thank you to Jacklyn, Karen, and all the event curators and hosts, because that's kind of a thankless job. People really don't always thank you guys, and it's not like you're gonna get rich doing it. So thank you. I'm gonna probably read a little bit from the book. I'm being sneaky because I'm supposed to be under an embargo. So until I discuss it with this other group on July 1st, but I'm gonna read a poem at least from the book. Do you have a request, Karen? I'll read a poem for you.
Yes, I do. I have the request to read that opening poem, which is called Transcending the Bow.
Yes, I will read that one. That sounds great. It's actually an ekphrastic poem that borrows from the painting with the same title by the painter Brittany Leanne Williams. And it's a group of Black women who are nude, who are like flying in the air through the branches of a tree. And this is where the poem kind of took off for me. So, transcending the bow. To be above, to float, to rise, to crumble within the dusk, rich spectral butterflies dipped in umber and kink, pink as your palms and soles tickling autumn leaves with tenderness, wavering like the opening of mouths. Arc and flutter you dance in the womb of the sky, among arteries and capillaries reaching out as heavy branches. Understand how roots twin the blood dance underground, spread wider, deeper, all of you, all of us, swimming, folding, lofty kicks in the air. Someone will attempt to remind you, even in this, a honeyed cloudless expanse, that people hid and died in such cradles. You recall and still levitate, alive with unbound grace. So I'll scroll to something a little bit different. Because as Karen said, she has a hard copy of the book. I don't. I'm reading from the PDF, guys. So that's why I'm scrolling. But there's another poet in here who I sorely miss. Her name was, there's actually a couple, Wanda Coleman and Eric Priestley. Both of them were West Coast poets, and they make cameos in this book. And Wanda Coleman blurbed my first book, and I was over the moon. I couldn't believe it. But amazing poet. And this is a poem about the one night we got to hang out in Los Angeles. It's called Roscoe's with Wanda. Los Angeles let me have a gift. Wanda Coleman asked me where I wanted to go, offered to take me on a tour that started at Viper Room, where River Phoenix crumpled down to his last breath. I didn't want the whole strip, but I said, let's go to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. where we sat with our plates, buckwheat pancakes for me, chicken and waffles for everyone else, since I simply craved a pilgrimage to where the rappers like Tupac shared plates, and I got Wanda with all her words and her voice like a heavy opera, and I got Wanda cussing and laughing, and Wanda talking about mysteries and poems and reading books we couldn't afford to buy, and Vallejo's Trilsa. The thick, tangled branches of her locks, her black jacket veined with bright colors, and flourishes of her hands on her outstretched arms, insisting on her worth. And she knew I saw hers, and she saw mine, in spite of all our lumps, without ribbons or bows. So, um, I'll read a couple poems. I'm watching the time. I hate being that poet that goes over the time. So the last book was a different kind of book. I think there's more to celebrate in the new book. And I find myself looking at this book now and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I'm in a new place. So I'll read something kind of bluesy, kind of sweet. Wichita Lineman for Cassandra Wilson. When Cassandra opens the cover that reminds you of Glenn Campbell, the eyes I see are dimpled. His arms are arc gently under a T of shoulders. Slight parentheses, same as his sinewed stance. Why is his body familiar? Like decades stacked and popped in one touch. Broken in the back of my throat when our lips spoke to each other once, so briefly. I knew I need him more than wanted him. I insist the lyric reminiscence. Some memory taps pulse into me like I saw him come home once. Like I knew the iron flattening his shirt. Like I knew the sweat gathered in our kitchen, a hollow trapped in the small of his back, at the yoke of him, still familiar with a day's sweat, as if he had always known where I stood. How I held up a doorway with my lean, the tilt of my head bent to listening rain, tapping its staccato long past midnight, while it slicks my skin with summer cooling so swiftly. My Wichita lineman, still on the line, there will be no dusk in our kitchen, no narrow hum tickling his spine, no clasped limbs in a locket of paired bodies. He is a blues I know, a song caught in the dusk that I avoid singing, yet I hum sometimes faintly, conjuring a steady stutter of circuits. I don't know, I keep hopping around. I'm gonna go with the poem that I like, that I come back to a lot in this book. The title is referencing a liberation theology book by James Cone, but it's a story that's really about me being in my PhD program and coming out of my home to hear somebody playing Rush Limbaugh on the air. And the description of how Rush was describing liberals sounded very much like myself, including that, these people go and sit in Bill Ayer's living room, and Bill and Bernadine are my neighbors. So I see them a lot. I was just like, yeah, those are my people. That's who I hang with, Rush. So, yeah, I'll just say that it's kind of like a funny little joke, especially when I think of the end of the poem. But I'll read it. Prophetic fragments. Prophecy is rendered as whole mythic animal. It twists limbs free and open, wide billowing spread of white dragging reams over daylight. People turn their heads, ignore quiet attrition. I mince downstairs with a tender ankle and sore foot, lean into a railing with weight a lover never held. There is no easy sweep that foretells what comes. Besides, one day, steady breath stops. I count inhalations as I deliberately deposit weight on each foot. Underneath, a house's foundation gradually crumbles. The water may be poisoned beyond redemption. It runs, wears away rock, cuts down soil, carries wet in small measures. Prophecy announces titles like Liberation, filling my bag with paperbacks and hardcover spines by poets and preachers, like I did that morning when a man sat in a dust-beaten truck, listening to the pundit yelling about university students touting liberation theology while sitting in living rooms of dangerous radicals. His truck windows are open and his radio blares. I silently admit truth. I have done all those transgressions, part of a list longer than this diatribe or James Cone's tome in my heavy book bag. He pulls off without looking at me. I lift my bag strap, bring it closer while I walk to the bus stop. We head to different destinations. Both of us will eventually become dust, but prophecy calls, insists the future will fragment the myth that he listens to and expects. And I guess I'm skipping around. I'm gonna read the last poem in the book. Look at the time. I might have that be the penultimate poem and then I'm gonna hush because I want to hear some of these other great poems. This is the last poem in my book, Break the Habit. Go after Gwendolyn Brooks' Old Mary. If you examine the embers of my life, they will be burned to the last. If anything is worth loving, defense rings its resonant siren. Weaponry is an option that boldly blacksmiths the tender blooming sprout of the present. I seek methods to fortify a steely tense because the heart requires smelting. It wavers in the hungry yellow tongues, little strong licks of heat that echo many hurts. I cannot deny what rocked and kept me, what once made me feel safe, gone now, ashes, dust, burned, singed, blown to a language that wind and soil must know. This wild whisper runs inside me and I must answer it. Or the rustling of skin shall molt what is left. I will not allow myself to live half a life. So I must go. And it's a golden shovel. I forgot to say that. So it pulls a line from Old Mary and you can read it on the side, but it's still like, I'm not going anywhere. I love it. So I'll close with, you know what? Yeah, I haven't read this one in a while. The first poem in this book, it's called A Lesson from the Terror Dome. So if you're a Public Enemy fan by any chance, it'll probably resonate with you. But if you're not, it's okay. A Lesson from the Terror Dome. Echoes of sirens blared while phrases belted from the boom of Chuck D's voice, left imprints sinking into memory that bobs up when buoyant history is necessary. The blast and thump of Welcome to the Terror Dome droned intent with Flavor Flav's clock swinging on his neck, a manic shining searchlight beaming from a black planet that still embodies fear and chaos for some. And when the dancers marched and pivoted in lockstep military formation in front of a target with crosshairs imposed on a Black man's silhouette, Chuck D insisted to everyone in earshot, come on down. And the sample's rapid response, get down, fired back. But the internal rhyme in the shooting of Huey Newton never left my head. It sent me curious to a small Midwestern library before internet searches streamed into houses. So my finger traced columns in an antiquated guide to periodicals, flipped through a card catalog's long shelves, looked for the ends, then Newton. Who was he? When I clicked the microfiche onto Spindle and rolled through articles, moving across a white screen, squares of photos and text rolled one frame at a time until the brief article appeared. Black Panther found dead in Oakland. I shook my head, silently asked how much of the story is missing. I wouldn't even know about the bullet dropping Newton if Chuck hadn't told me. So I'll leave it with that. And I'm really glad I got to join you. I feel really honored and special that I made it for this very last one, and I get to be in good company with people who love poems.
And we thank you very much, Tara Betts, for being here with us this evening in this historic and very moving presentation. So the last part of our show is going to be hosted by Dwayne Reeves and Gary Stein, who along with Jacklyn Potter edited Cabin Fever. This is Cabin Fever. And I'm going to turn the mic over to these very able poets. They've probably worked out what they're going to do with each other. And I will turn the program now to Dwayne, and we will see how this all goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. You're our champ tonight. And what an evening it is. We finally have something to celebrate in this world. I was so delighted back when Karen called me up and said, will you participate? And of course I would. You know, I immediately started hearing Jacklyn's voice. That is something that stays, if you were fortunate enough to hear that voice, it stays with you. And Gary Stein and I were very lucky to have a pageant of sorts with Jacklyn's voice as we worked on the anthology. It's quite a story. Now this was all back before the electronic world took over the poetry world. So we were charged with developing an anthology of poems that had been read over, goodness, about 17 years. So that put us at close to nearly 300 poets. And then we requested a number of poems from each poet. And of course, Jacklyn had a story with every poet and sometimes even a story with every poem. And she loved them all. And that was perhaps the great joy you could hear in her voice. Jacklyn celebrated her poets. She celebrated their voices. And she wanted everyone else to celebrate those voices. So I was delighted when you open the book, you start seeing a lot of exclamation points. That's Jacklyn's voice. Jacklyn has a beautiful party voice, a tinsel voice, something that stayed with you. And this evening, I'm just thrilled to have her voice back here with us. And it's actually crystallized within about 227 poems in the anthology at my last count here, beautiful poems. So thank you, Jacklyn. And Gary, I'll turn it over to you. You kept us between the ditches. You kept us going.
Well, Dwayne, thank you very much. And I too remember Jacklyn's wonderful voice. Jacklyn actually discovered me as a poet over the years since 1996, when I read at Miller Cabin. I probably read in 50 other places. And that was the most impressive introduction I've ever had by Jacklyn. Her introduction was probably better than my reading. And she taught me things about my poetry that I didn't really appreciate because she put it so well. And the Miller Cabin was another treat because I got to work with Jacklyn, as Dwayne explained, going over the poets that we selected in the book. And any of you who are in the book, and many of you are, or have read the book, you'll see that we're in good company. I mean, some of not just good local poets, not just good regional poets. There are poets in the book like Stanley Plumley, Roland Flint, Lucille Clifton, Ethelbert Miller, famous poets, and we're honored. We were honored just to read their work, much less be included in the book ourselves. And what I like to do is read a poem that I first read in June 1996 at Miller Cabin. I read it there. It was published by Poetry 3 years later, and it appears in the anthology. The poem is called Subway. When cities swell with business, cramping motion, men flow through stone, pulsed blood beneath skin. The river parts and we rattle the times in our fast seats, invisible as a stranger's dream, nodding on the aisle. We lean toward each stop as if with hope, while the train transfuses itself. What enters the heart enters between beats. Above us, doors and faces wait to open to our rising like flowers, dreaming. Sun blooms over each stem at the same deliberate speed. We travel the winking lights of the tunnel, space between darkness. Any event, the beauty of the Miller Cabin reading is I think it spawned many other readings. It evolved to such an extent with Jacklyn's work and of course with the work of Karen Alanier, who organized it and ran it through WordWorks. And it created enough of other readings and other poetry sessions so that in a sense it spawned all generations of other poets and other readers. And we owe a debt of thanks to Jacklyn and of course to Karen Alanier for that. Thank you. Dwayne, I'm going to send it back to you.
Okay, I'll quickly read the poem that we included in the anthology. It's an awakening poem. It's one of 3 obods in the collection. It's called Obod in E. The wet voice is soft, a slow transfer of touch. Breath returned to the sun, now breastplated and all tense with spears. So much opening sex, hushed mandates and decisions. Out here, the living can't sleep alone. The proof's one communal array of baby doves. Yet a voice says questions survive in the unseen, in a seed's cracked shell, the red core uncontained. What's left once any lover's gone? It's the soul lifting both dirty hands, a fallback, a flesh to salt, jeans on the floor, a slow walk home. Today's the first day of pink lips and unapologetic green. Spring's opera staged within every dying crocus head. I hear 1,000 awkward sounds. The sweet silence of the body abandoned. A voice the body loved. Thank you. And Jacklyn, and let's turn it next on the list. I have Miles. Miles, are you ready to read a poem?
Yes, I am. Thanks a lot, Dwayne. This poem is called Duck Stamps. The way I'm living now is like when you're at the post office and you need stamps desperately, but want a beautiful design to give your correspondent some putative distinction. But the clerk at the counter is out of the first 6 designs you ask for, and you want to see the stamps she does have. But it's almost lunchtime, and she looks as if she keeps a gun under the counter. And there are 19 people behind you, each with a package to mail, and all of them look as if they have guns under their coats. So you tell the clerk you'll take anything. And she gives you a book of duck stamps. 20 green mallards pointing their bills stiffly to the left, decoy eyes stuck square in their heads, seeing nothing, making contact with nothing, lined up like a shooting gallery for disgruntled postal clerks. And you feel every bit as wooden and lifeless as the ducks as you paste them on the envelopes to 20 past due bills, while others emblazon love letters with pictures of movie stars and great events of history and every flower of the field.
Gorgeous. And Anne, are you there with this beautiful poem, Ode?
Yes, yes, I'm here. Okay. And this poem just happened to be really inspired by Jackie's motto, toujours le mot, always the word. Ode. We are all words, broken like teeth, riddled with holes. What are apple words, black words, red words, words of ivory, of clay? Golden words like orange's radiant table, as fleshy as earlobes, supple as skin, travel as wave, particle. Waitress of light, we pay our own ransom, rejoice.
Thank you, gorgeous. And Michael, I see you're up there.
I'm here. I am here. I have a kind of watery, birdish poem, which the Rock Creek always made me think of that. And I do remember one night, I think it was Richard Hartice was reading down there, and this great blue heron rises out of the creek behind him as he starts his poem. And it was just like, what would you say? Just co-opted by nature. I mean, there was a beautiful beauty in that. So this is a poem called Hunger. Kind of takes place down near Roosevelt Island. The old heron in the river takes one stitch a day, one stitch, basting the water's edge to the shade overhanging the bank. Leg deep in a seam of hydrilla, his patience seems infinite. He stands over his piece of river like a cloud, his prey drawn to its shelter. Everything is searching, and the night will be long. A quick stab, and he is fed. At dusk, he flies unlabored, each wing beat sure, over the fabric of homes knit shoulder to shoulder, where we sleep as close together as our hungers will allow. Over us all, he coils, a single letter without a word. Thank you. And we're on next to Gary Stein.
Whoop. Maybe if we move on, Gary, do you have anything else to say?
No, I think it's been well said, and I'm not going to repeat it. But thank you, Michael, for the beautiful poem.
And moving on to our champion, Karen, closing us out.
Thank you, both Dwayne and Gary. This is a wonderful tour of the cabin fever, and I end with a love poem. It's called Something Growing, and hopefully there will be other new programs from the WordWorks, so we'll hope for that. Something growing. Viscous as honey, sweet as the dew of that suckleweed, honey, oh honey, my petals burn when you plant yours on mine. It's agriculture without politicians in smoke-filled caucus rooms, Zeus catapults those bolts of lightning. Can you catch that as I nab the electrical charge from you? Rain, 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 and then the sun paints its green. That not envy, not look at the roots and the airborne stalks feeling their way. Wow. Well, I want to thank everyone for their part in this evening tonight. The wonderful tribute to Jacklyn by Anne and Michael, the poems by the young poets Jenna Neske and Julian Berman, and thank you to our special guests, Kathy Haley, Arden Levine, and Tara Betts. And thank you to the National Park Service and our wonderful audience for all the years of support. If you've never been to Joaquin Miller's cabin in Washington, D.C.'s Rock Creek Park, you will still find it at Picnic Grove 6, north of the Ranger Station on Beach Drive. The next WordWorks program is June 29th, when Sue Ellen Thompson is featured in our last Poets versus the Pandemic program. Fran Abrams and Aaron Casegdo Kimura will read with her. I say good night and blessings to all. Please remember to save the chat. There's been a lot of text in the chat, and you may want to recapture some of that. Any of you who didn't say anything in the chat, feel free right now to say something so that we know you were here. We love you all for being here, and God bless you. And come back to other WordWorks programs, if not this. And good night to Jacklyn.